when the same phenomenon is described in completely opposite ways by those at the center of events and by those far removed from their effects. It's very likely the first version reflects reality, while the second is pure fantasy. But simply stating this isn't enough. If we don't understand how fantasy is born from within reality itself, we fail to grasp the true nature of that reality. Take, for instance, the New World Order. From the perspective of Brazil, a peripheral country, it's often seen as nothing more than a new label for American capitalism. But from within the United States, at the heart of the matter, it's perceived as a socialist project, inherently anti-American. The Americans, of course, see things more clearly, while we, once again, are lost in delusion. A few outrageous facts, usually hidden from the Brazilian public, will make this more evident. Over the last decade, the U.S. has dismantled its nuclear defense system, reducing its stockpile of atomic weapons to just 1/5 of that held by Russia and China. It has ceded control of strategic areas like the Panama Canal to Beijing and allowed Chinese espionage to operate freely on American soil. Simultaneously, the U.S. has openly violated its own constitution by surrendering increasing portions of its national sovereignty to the UN, allowing international organizations to interfere in domestic matters such as education. As a result, the public school textbooks are now filled with anti-American propaganda and are thoroughly purged of any signs of patriotism or Christianity. American territory itself has been invaded and taken over by European indigenous and environmental NGOs. By the mid-1980s, 10% of the country's total land area was already out of the control of American citizens and their government, representing the largest transfer of real estate ownership in human history. The concessions made by the ruling class to the New Left since the 1960s have turned the academic, journalistic, and cinematic establishment into an uncontrollable anti-American propaganda machine. American universities have become the largest network of Marxist indoctrination the world has ever seen, surpassing even the Soviet university system. The violent suppression of any anti-communist sentiment has made it impossible for the government to prevent the infiltration of Soviet and later Chinese spies into the FBI, CIA, NSA, and military intelligence services. Ironically, while the opening of the Moscow archives retrospectively vindicated Joe McCarthy, proving that communist infiltration into the federal administration in the 1950s was even more extensive than he claimed. And while Soviet and Chinese leaders admitted that during the Vietnam War, they spent more on psychological warfare within the U.S. than on military expenses on the battlefield, the much broader infiltration in the 1970s-90s occurred under the protection of political correctness, which branded anyone who dared to address the issue as a fascist in the mainstream media. To suggest that a nation disarming and weakening itself to such an extent could simultaneously be at the height of a global imperialist expansion is to abuse the right to stupidity. The U.S. is not the master of globalism. It is its first and greatest victim. It is true that some major American fortunes are among the key forces that created this new state of affairs. But confusing the plans of a handful of monopolistic dynasties with the national interest of the United States, or the spirit of liberal capitalism, is more than stupidity. It's insanity. Monopolism and liberalism are antagonistic terms, and many of these monopolistic organizations have already proven their inherent anti-Americanism by funding the two totalitarian regimes that most eagerly sought to destroy the U.S., Soviet communism and Nazis. However, stupidity doesn't arise out of nowhere. These organizations are the same ones that, along with the ever-helpful European Economic Community, subsidize most of the leftist movements worldwide and spark a global wave of anti-Americanism, found explicit expression at the Durban Conference. They are the ones who, under the pretext of anti-racism, brought pro-communist governments to power in South Africa and Zimbabwe, which are now engaged in ethnic cleansing. That the conference, by its ominous silence, turned from a heinous crime into a right and a merit. Quick investigation into the funding sources of the Brazilian intelligentsia, grants, fellowships, research funds, and publications will reveal that without the help of these monopolistic organizations, leftism would virtually disappear from our public scene. Thus, the idiotic fantasy reveals its true purpose. If within the U.S., globalist monopolism strives to dilute national sovereignty into subservience to the international community, it's only logical that it would subsidize abroad the outcry that blames the American Republic for the very evils of the New World Order that oppresses it. Boldest trick of criminals, to pin the blame on their victim. Leftist intellectuals are always in need of money, and ready to be led by the first carrot someone dangles before their eager noses. No one is more susceptible to manipulation than that type of uncultured, verbose, vain, and foolish activist intellectual that third world universities churn out in apocalyptic quantities every year. It's no wonder that, without a clear intellectual vision of what's happening in the world, these people are equally devoid of moral consciousness and, believing they are fighting for the good, will defend any heinous crime that appears to target the bête noire of their delusions, anti-imperialism. Thus, there is no shortage of people on TV screens and newspaper pages in this country who seek to downplay the horror of last Tuesday's attacks, legitimizing them as inevitable consequences of George W. Bush's foreign policy, as if such complex terrorist operations could have been improvised in the few months since the new president took office. George W. Bush said that in the face of the horror that occurred at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, the U.S. was determined to no longer distinguish between the terrorists and those who harbor them. How can we exclude from these protectors those who, whether through ignorance or malice, carry out in the media the disinformation and psychological warfare operations, without whose support no armed aggression can hope to succeed?